This is Julien, the French winemaking guy who makes wine videos here on YouTube. Yes, wine videos, and this is my top 40 Italian wine terms, 40 most important Italian wines that you should know from A to Z. If 40 sounds a little bit too long, too complicated for you, I suggest you check out my top 10 Italian wine terms. It's a little bit easier, but if you are here, you definitely want to become an Italian wine expert. So yes, let's go for our top 40 from A to Z. At the end of this video, I will give you my favorite of all Italian wine proverbs. It's actually quite funny, so I suggest you stick around for this till the end of this video, or you can just go and navigate towards the end of this video and check out that funny Italian wine proverb, Italian wine quote. But let's get into our top 40 wine terms from A to Z. So obviously we are going to be starting with the letter A, and one of the most famous style of red wines coming out of Italy, made from dried red grapes. Yes, they dry the grapes before they make the wine, which makes Amarone so powerful, so full-bodied, and so delicious. So how do you go about pronouncing Amarone? Well, like I've just said, Amarone. You do want to insist on the O here, Amarone. If you can pronounce the Italian pronunciation, and I'm going to be giving you all along the typical Italian pronunciation because I lived in Italy for quite a while and I am a French winemaker, but I speak fluent Italian as well. So you have to say Amarone, Amarone. Obviously, Amarone comes from the province of Verona, near the city of Verona, so it comes under the name Amarone della Valpolicella. You can just say Amarone della Valpolicella. Now, a famous grape variety coming out of Italy, from the south of Italy, from the provinces of Campania, the regions of Campania, as well as Basilicata, Aglianico. Aglianico, you do want to insist on the A here, Aglianico. Do not pronounce the G, do not say Aglianico, rather Aglianico. Obviously, I in Italian sounds like E, double E, so you say Aglianico rather than Aglianico. Obviously not, Aglianico. Famous Aglianico wines include the DOCG of Taurasi, as you can see here at the bottom, Taurasi, which is grown near the city of Naples, and in the region of Basilicata, also in the south, down the south of the Italian boot, you will find some wines called Aglianico del Vulture. If you're looking for a good Aglianico to try, so those are quite powerful, pungent, very spicy red wines. Delicious red wines made from Aglianico. Look out for Taurasi and Aglianico del Vulture. Of course, if we're staying with the letter A, we're going back to the north of the country, in around the town of Asti, in the Piedmont wine region in the north of Italy. Asti is particularly famous for making these sparkling, sweet sparkling wines made from the muscat grape, the Moscato d'Asti. Sweet sparkling wines called Moscato d'Asti, but around Asti, the town of Asti, you will also find some very good red wines made from the Barbera or the Nebbiolo grape, and they will come under the names Barbera d'Asti or Nebbiolo d'Asti. Talking about Barbera, one of the most famous of the many grape varieties that you will find coming out of Italy is the famous Barbera. Barbera. If you can't say the Italian pronunciation, say Barbera, otherwise Barbera. Insist on the bay. Insist on the bay here in the middle, Barbera. Barbera d'Asti, like we talked about before, but you will also find delicious Barbera wines coming out of Alba, another town nearby Asti in the Piedmont wine region. Barbera wines are very crisp, quite acidic, loads of fresh red fruit, red berry fruits I should say, characters coming out of Barbera. Very zingy, very food-friendly wines from Barbera. We're staying in the Piedmont in the north of Italy with a wine made from Nebbiolo, so un vino di Nebbiolo, a wine made from Nebbiolo that is called Barbaresco. Barbaresco. Insist on the esco at the end. Barbaresco. If you can't pronounce the typical Italian pronunciation, say Barbaresco. Barbaresco, un vino di Nebbiolo. The neighbor from Barbaresco, also made with the Nebbiolo grape. Or did I say neighbor from Barbaresco? No, neighbor from Barbaresco is the Barolo. Also a town, one of the most important, significant, famous towns in Italy for wine production, that is called Barolo. Barolo, you can say Barolo, or the typical Italian pronunciation, Barolo. So I've been talking about the Piedmont wine region. The Italians call it the Piemonte. The Piemonte because it is the Piedmont on the Alps mountains up north of Italy. The town and the famous Nebbiolo wine from Barolo. Of course, this is not per se the name of one wine. This is a generic term, but very, very important. In Italy, if you're navigating or traveling to Italy, Bianco, which means white wine. So Vino, Bianco. Obviously, Italy is a little bit more famous for producing red wines, but they make some delicious white wines, and we're going to be talking about quite a few here. So Vino, Bianco. Bianco means white. Bolgheri. Bolgheri. So you may not be familiar with this name, but it is very, very important in the world of Vino in Italy. Bolgheri is a Tuscan village on the coast, on the Etruscan coast of Tuscany, as opposed to Chianti that is a little bit more inland. Bolgheri is on the coast and produces wines not from the Sangiovese grape that is so typical of Tuscany, as we were going to be talking about later. But Bolgheri makes wines from the Bordeaux grape varieties, namely Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot. Bolgheri makes some of the most expensive wines in Italy, including Ornellaia and Sassicaia. If you haven't heard about Bolgheri, well, check it out because it makes some of the most expensive, the most demanded, and some of the best wines in Italy. How do you go about pronouncing Bolgheri? As I've just said, Bolgheri. The typical Italian pronunciation, Bolgheri. Of course, we're staying in Tuscany, and you will find the wines coming out of Brunello di Montalcino. So Montalcino here is the name of the town, so the wines actually come out of Montalcino, as you can see, Montalcino. C, one single C in Italian is pronounced CH, so say Montalcino. Brunello here is kind of a reference to the color of the wine that is particularly down, so sort of brown. But Brunello wines are made from Sangiovese, so deep, dark, intense, spicy wines coming out of Brunello. The typical Italian pronunciation, Brunello. Do insist on the double L here because anytime there is a double letter in Italian, you do want to insist on it. So say Brunello. Brunello di Montalcino. Now, another generic term in Italy that you will find very, very commonly on many wine labels, and when you're navigating the wonders of the Italian wines, the word cantina. Cantina is Italian for winery, so you do want to be aware of what it means. Cantina, you do want to insist on the I and the T in the middle of that word, cantina. Two very famous cantine. Yes, in Italian, when you say plural of a word finishing with A, you finish it with E rather than saying cantinas. You do not say cantinas when it's plural, you say cantine. So two famous cantine are Argiolas in Sardinia, on the beautiful island of Sardinia, and Cantina Zaccanini in the Abruzzo region of Italy. Of course, Chianti. I'm sure you already know how to say Chianti, so I'm not going to take too long, but do not say Chianti or Chianti. Of course, you say Chianti. You will find different appellations around Chianti. Of course, you will find Chianti Classico, and I think we'll talk about Classico later on. Classico meaning that it's in the heart of the appellation, but you will find other sub-areas such as Chianti Rufina and Chianti Colline Senesi, also Chianti Colline Pisane. So Colline Senesi are the hills around the city of Siena, the famous Tuscan city of Siena. Of course, there's Florence and Siena in Tuscany. And then you will find Chianti Colline Pisane, which are from the hills of Pisa, which is another Tuscan city, Pisa. So Chianti. Now Classico. Of course, Classico means this is the original heart of any appellation, or many appellations in Italy, including Chianti, Classico. You will also find Classico on Valpolicella wines, so the Amarones that we were talking about before. If the label says Classico, Valpolicella Classico, it means it comes from the heart, where the sort of original terroir, the original expression of the grape and of the wine comes from. So Classico is not necessarily better, but it's more typical, more traditional, let's say. You will also find Classico in Soave, which are some delicious white wines made also in the north of the country. So how do you go about pronouncing Classico? Well, insist on the A here, Classico. Classico. At least we're lucky here there is no A, so just Classico, Chianti Classico. Now, two generic terms that designate appellation, well, that are part of the appellation system in Italy: DOC and DOCG. DOC meaning Denominazione di Origine Controllata, meaning that this is simply an appellation of origin. Most of the wines in Italy fall under DOC. Now, for a bit of a superior appellation, or in the hierarchy of Italian wine, DOCG is going to be meaning that you have here an appellation that is perhaps more ancient and more recognized for the quality of its wine. So generally speaking, slightly better wines overall. Of course, there are going to be many exceptions. And DOCG stands for Denominazione di Origine Controllata e Garantita, meaning that the appellation of origin is not only controlled, but it's guaranteed. Because in Italy, you know, sometimes they control things, but they're not necessarily guarantee them. DOCG are guaranteed. It's just, those are just terms, but they are very, very important. Now, another grape grown in the north of the country, that is Dolcetto. Dolcetto makes some very round, slightly sweet, slightly jammy red wines, powerful, kind of the opposite of Barbera, which are very acidic and fragrant and vibrant. Dolcettos are rounded and full-bodied red wines. You'll find Dolcetto di Langhe, Dolcetto d'Alba and Dolcetto d'Asti, like we talked about before, around those two towns of Alba and Asti, but you'll also find more generic Dolcettos coming out of the area of Langhe. Dolcetto. Do insist on the double T here, Dolcetto. Dolcetto, double T, and insist on the A here, Dolcetto. Now we're going to the very south in Sicily, on the mount. This is actually a volcano, Etna. Yes, they grow vines on a volcano in this area of Sicily, and they make wines, red wines and white wines, that are the Etna Rosso, the red wines coming out of Etna, and the Etna Bianco. If you've learned your previous word, we talked about Bianco. The Etna Rosso, so the red Etna wines, very mineral, very smoky, yeah, quite unique wines really. The Etna red wines, the Rosso, are made from Nerello Mascalese and Nerello Cappuccio, which are two of the local grapes that they've got here. The Bianco, the Bianchi, Etna Bianchi, are made from the Catarratto grape variety. Now, back to the north of the country with one of the best sparkling wines coming out of Italy, really, Franciacorta. It's not all that famous outside of Italy, Franciacorta, but Franciacorta are really truly the Italian counterpart to French champagne. Some of the very best sparkling wines. Forget about Prosecco, try Franciacorta. Coming, made from mainly Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, sometimes a little bit of Pinot Blanc, Pinot Bianco. Franciacorta wines are absolutely delicious. You must try them. The Italians would say bollicine. Bollicine means sparkling wines. So Bollicine della Lombardia, because Franciacorta is coming out of the Lombardy wine region, Lombardia. Franciacorta. You can just say Franciacorta. Do insist on the corta towards the end. Gavi, the beautiful wines made from the Cortese grape up in the north of the country that are called Gavi. Gavi, the ones coming from around the town of Gavi that they call the Comune di Gavi are going to be the Gavi del Comune di Gavi, which is a DOCG, so the highest appellation in the hierarchy of Italian wine. Gavi. Now Glera. Yep, you've heard about Prosecco, and we'll talk more about Prosecco later on, but the grape behind Prosecco, because they've renamed that grape that was before called Prosecco to call it Glera to protect the name Prosecco itself. Anyway, it's a long story short. Now the grape behind the wines of Prosecco are called Glera. Glera is the grape, the white wine grape variety that is responsible for making the so successful and famous Prosecco wines. Glera. Now IGT. So we talked about DOC and DOCG, or as the Italians say, DOC and DOCG. Now IGT are the kind of vin de pays, or the kind of lower appellation wines, and IGT stands for Indicazione Geografica Tipica, so typical indication of geography. Now IGT wines are not necessarily inferior in quality. Many producers, because they do not fall into Chianti, for example in Tuscany, make wines under IGT appellations, such as all the Super Tuscans, or many Super Tuscans that are made from Cabernet and Merlot blended with Sangiovese are going to fall into IGT wines. So you need to kind of have an idea of what IGT means. Very important appellation in Italy. Many producers use them for varietal wines that don't fall under the DOC or DOCG appellations. IGT, as the Italians say. IGT, well, the Italians would say IGT. Now, we're going around the Emilia-Romagna, towards the north of the country, but not all that north, around the city of Bologna, for this very typical style, very famous style of sparkling red wines coming out of Italy, Lambrusco. Lambrusco, to insist on the usco. Lambrusco. You can just say Lambrusco if you can say the Italian pronunciation. Lambrusco. Now, very famous grape variety, red grape variety, coming mainly out of Abruzzo. So we are in the center of Italy, but towards the east, toward the Adriatic Sea, in the region of Abruzzo, and they grow there successfully the grape that is called Montepulciano. I made a video about Montepulciano and the confusion that there can be, because Montepulciano is a town in Tuscany as well as this grape variety grown in Abruzzo. But how to pronounce it? Montepulciano. Do insist on the ano at the end, just like you would say piano, say Montepulciano. Montepulciano. We talked already about Moscato and Moscato d'Asti, so I'm not going to insist all that much, but yeah, obviously a very important grape. Muscat grape. It can be either Moscato Giallo or Moscato d'Alexandria. Moscato d'Asti, these sweet sparkling wines. Most of the times they're rather sweet. Moscato d'Asti. When a sparkling wine in Italy is sparkling, did I say, yeah, does that make sense? It probably doesn't. They call it spumante. Spumante is essentially Italian for sparkling wine. Now, Nebbiolo. We talked about Nebbiolo, arguably producing the grape variety, producing some of the very best red wines in Italy, the wines from Barolo, from Barbaresco, from Langhe. Nebbiolo, because there is a double here, double B here, insist on the double B here in the center. Nebbiolo, Nebbiolo. So if you cannot afford Barolo, Barbaresco, look out for Nebbiolo. Langhe Nebbiolo, from the Langhe area, which is nearby Barolo and Barbaresco, but not as prestigious the terroirs and the appellations. So cheaper Nebbiolo, but it's a good way to get your hands and have an idea of what a Nebbiolo wine tastes like from a very good area that is the only good area pretty much in the world that makes Nebbiolo wine. So Langhe is a good one to look out for on your wine labels. Passito is a technique that consists of drying grapes, often in the attic, or they have some specific buildings as well, but traditionally they would dry the grapes in the attic of the winery, and the grapes coming out of this drying process are called passito, and then they make wine out of them, and they call those wines passito as well. You'll find some very famous passito coming out of Sicily, the island of Sicily in the very south, made from Moscato di Alexandria grapes, I believe, that are called Passito di Pantelleria. Passito di Pantelleria, but the passito or passitamento technique is used all around Italy to make those sweet dessert wines. Passito. Of course, Pinot Grigio, that grape that you've all heard about, that makes these slightly off-dry white wines most of the time in a crisp, fragrant style. Pinot Grigio. Of course, do not pronounce the T at the end of Pinot. Just say Pinot Grigio. Do insist on the gris, on the first part of Grigio here. Pinot Grigio for the typical Italian pronunciation. Most of the Pinot Grigio wines come under the appellation Pinot Grigio delle Venezie, meaning that they come from the Veneto in the north of the country, very large and broad appellation, yet you must be aware of that name, Pinot Grigio delle Venezie, Pinot Grigio delle Venezie. Another very famous red grape variety, that one that is grown in the very south of Italy, in the heel of the Italian boot in the Puglia wine region, Primitivo. Primitivo is related to Zinfandel in California, so you must now have a little bit of an idea what a Primitivo wine tastes like. Very rich, very powerful, quite spicy, a little bit minty as well. Beautiful wines, powerful, alcoholic, full-bodied wines made from Primitivo. Primitivo. To insist on the last, well, not the last, but the syllable just before the last syllable, like is the case most of the time in Italian, like Primitivo. Primitivo di Puglia, when it comes from Puglia. Prosecco, you've heard about Prosecco, the best-selling sparkling wine that you can find anywhere and everywhere. Now, if you're looking for a better Prosecco than your ordinary cheap Prosecco that you will find in any supermarket, just look out for the Prosecco Conegliano Valdobbiadene. How do you pronounce Prosecco? Well, Prosecco. Because there is a double C here, do insist on that double C and then on the secco. Prosecco, or you can say Prosecco. Now, best Prosecco, some of the best come out of Conegliano Valdobbiadene. Prosecco Conegliano Valdobbiadene. If you're saying Conegliano Valdobbiadene, do insist on the double B. As usual, double B, accentuation. Prosecco Valdobbiadene. Another generic term when we talk about Italian wine, Riserva. Riserva, you will find some Chianti Riserva, meaning that the wine has been aged for longer in wine barrels or in tanks. Riserva wines are also, like anywhere else, generally riper grapes from better terroir. So Riserva generally means that it's going to be slightly better wine. You will find Chianti Riserva, Chianti Classico Riserva, Chianti Classico Riserva Superiore. Superiore supposedly means that it's going to be even better. One term that you should know how to pronounce, Riserva. Riserva. Roero, one of the top white wine appellations coming out of Italy, making wines from Arnese grape variety in the Piedmont. Roero is a DOCG, so top ranking in the Italian wine hierarchy. Roero. If you haven't tried Roero wines, they're crisp, they're fragrant, they're quite floral, they're a bit zingy, citrusy. Some delicious. I personally like the wines coming out of Roero, the Arnese wines from Roero. Now, Rosso is Italian for red. Vino Rosso, I'm sure you've heard about this, il vino della casa, il vino rosso della casa. You see this on many wine labels and in many bars all around the world. Vino Rosso. Sangiovese, of course, is the grape behind the great wines of Tuscany, such as Chianti, Brunello, Vino Nobile, and Morellino di Scanzano. So you must know how to pronounce Sangiovese. Do insist on the ese towards the end. Sangiovese. Sangiovese. Beautiful grape variety. Beautiful red wines. Spicy, quite tannic, a little bit edgy. Beautiful wines of Sangiovese. Now, another very excellent red grape that is not very famous. So if you haven't tried a Sagrantino, especially those coming out of Montefalco, a town in Umbria, well, do try wines coming out of Montefalco, Sagrantino di Montefalco. Beautiful wine. Some of the best Italian wines I've ever tried are made from Sagrantino di Montefalco in Umbria. Another great white wine. See, there are many white wines coming out of Italy. The wines made in Soave in the Veneto, north of the country, from the Garganega grape. Garganega di Soave. Beautiful white wines, quite full-bodied, some round and oily, also throw a little bit citrusy. I mean, there's loads of complexity in a Soave Garganega wine, so do try wine. We talked about spumante. It means sparkling wine. In Italian, a very important term to have in mind, spumante. If a wine is not as sparkling, if it's more like fizzy, the Italians will say frizzante with a double Z. But if it's really truly sparkling, like a Prosecco is, or Franciacorta, like any solidly sparkling wine, really bubbly, they're going to call it spumante. Now, tenuta is one of those generic terms, just like cantina that we talked about before. That means winery. Tenuta means more like estate. So obviously you're going to have some wineries that are called tenuta something, like Tenuta San Guido in Bolgheri that we talked about before, in Italy, in Tuscany. Tenuta Biondisanti, Ludovico Antinori's Tenuta di Biserno, which is just also in Tuscany outside of Bolgheri. So all of those are, Biondisanti's is in Brunello. So tenuta seems to be used, at least for famous wineries, mainly in Tuscany. Tenuta. Uva, a generic term that not many people know in the world of wine, but you know, you've reached that number 37 out of 40, you might as well know. Uva is Italian for grape. Uva. So it's, you know, it's the essence of Italian wine, the essence of wine. Any wine comes from uva. And they also use that term that's called uvaggio. Uvaggio is the term for grape variety, or in French we would say cépage. In Italian they say uvaggio. Uvaggio. And grape is uva. Insist on the U, on the U, uva. We've talked about Valpolicella. Of course, there are the wines made from that are called Amarone, made from dried grapes, Amarone della Valpolicella, but they make other styles of wines in Valpolicella, sort of standard red dry styles of wines that are just called Valpolicella. They also make the ripasso, where they use the skins of the dried red grapes to make a bit of a more powerful wine that's called ripasso, and they make a sweet wine that's called resciotto della Valpolicella. How do you go about pronouncing Valpolicella with the truly Italian pronunciation? Say Valpolicella. Valpolicella. Again, there is this double L here, so Valpolicella. Do not say Valpolicella. No, Valpolicella. Number 39, Vin Santo. All around, all across Italy, but particularly in Tuscany, they will make, in many wineries, they will make wines coming, you know, that they've used the Passito technique on, so they've dried the grapes, often white wines, and they make those sweet dessert wines that are a little bit sweet, but not so much, a little bit savory, and they age those in wine barrels for quite a long time, and they end up with these very spicy, very sweet, savory white wines that are particularly fascinating, that are beautiful with desserts, beautiful with cheeses, that they call Vin Santo. Vin Santo, which means the saint wine. So Vin Santo. You'll find Vin Santo del Chianti, so from Chianti, made from, often in Chianti they'll make it from the white grapes that are Trebbiano, Malvasia, and sometimes red grapes like Sangiovese. And to finish off, we have to talk about a grape variety that starts with the letter Z, and this is a grape that is very famous all around the world. That's Muscat of Alexandria. In Italy they call it Zibibo. Zibibo. In Sicilia, Muscat of Alexandria, like the Passito di Pantelleria I was talking about before, are made from Zibibo. Zibibo. You will find some dry Zibibo wines as well. So those are very muscety, very fruity, very citrusy, lots of apricot, lots of peach characters coming out of the wines from Zibibo, because there is this double B, Zibibo. And we've reached the end, and my favorite Italian wine quote of them all, that says, non si può avere la botte piena e la moglie ubriaca. Non si può avere la botte piena e la moglie ubriaca. What does that mean? Well, it means one cannot have both the barrel full of wine and the wife drunk. Which is a way of saying, yeah, you can't have, you have to pay for what you get, and you have to work hard for it. And yeah, I quite like this Italian proverb. Non si può avere la botte piena e la moglie ubriaca. I quite like it. In French we say, you cannot have the butter and the money for the butter. I can't remember how you say this in English. Let me know in the comments if you remember. Anyway, this was my top 40 Italian wine terms, how to pronounce them, and quite a lot of information about them. Well, thank you so much for watching this long. I hope this video was useful. I will be working very soon, or if I have worked on that video, the top 100 Italian wines. It's going to be quite long and take a lot of efforts to do. If I've worked on it while you're watching this video, here is the link. Otherwise, it'll be coming on my channel very soon. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Give it a quick thumb up if you liked it to support my work, and I will see you soon in the wonderful world of wine. Au revoir. Bye bye. Ciao ciao.